The screen bursts alive with fury. Alex Jones leans forward into the microphone, sweat glistening on his forehead, his voice breaking into guttural roars that rattle the desk he slams with a heavy fist. His face is crimson, veins straining at his temples, as if sheer volume could transform his words into truth. The studio lights catch the wildness in his eyes, a man cornered, lashing out, desperate to control the narrative slipping through his fingers. His rant spirals into incoherence, the sound of raw anger with no tether to fact, no anchor to reason. And across from him, in stark contrast, sits Jasmine Crockett. She doesn't shout, she doesn't pound the table, she simply raises her hand, palm steady, eyes locked on Jones with the kind of calm that slices sharper than any scream. That stillness, that refusal to meet chaos with chaos, draws every gaze in the room. For the first time, Jones's bluster collides with silence, and the silence speaks louder. The audience leans forward. Viewers at home feel the tension radiating through their screens. This isn't just another outburst from America's most infamous conspiracy peddler. This is a showdown, and the balance of power is already shifting. Crockett's measured composure tells a story all its own. She knows something Jones doesn't. She knows the storm he built is about to crumble, and she has the receipts to prove it. Freeze frame. The image of Jones, mouth wide and mid-yell, distorted by rage, contrasted against Crockett's unflinching poise, burns into memory. It's the portrait of a crumbling empire facing its reckoning. But how did we get here? How did a talk show tyrant, once untouchable, find himself unraveling live on air? And how did a freshman congresswoman, armed not with shouting but with facts and dignity, bring him to this breaking point? The clash that unfolded next would leave millions stunned. But it didn't begin here. It began with years of lies. For decades, Alex Jones has thrived in the shadows between fact and fiction. He built an empire on fear, shouting into microphones about shadowy cabals, government plots, and fabricated enemies lurking just out of sight. Millions tuned in, not for truth, but for the theater of outrage. In his world, volume equaled validity, paranoia equaled patriotism, and every tragedy became a stage for him to spin another tale. He wasn't just a man on the radio. He was a cultural force who taught countless listeners to distrust their neighbors, their leaders, even reality itself. But lies are brittle things. They can grow, they can spread, they can infest conversations, yet they can't withstand the steady weight of truth. And while Jones inflated his persona, Jasmine Crockett was walking a very different path. A lawyer by trade, she built her reputation not with sound and fury, but with precision. In courtrooms, in hearings, in public service, she wielded facts like a scalpel. Where Jones found power in chaos, Crockett found strength in clarity. The collision course was inevitable. On one side stood the architect of manipulation, a man who had made a career out of tearing down trust in institutions and people alike. On the other stood a rising congresswoman who had quickly become known for her sharp wit, her fearless defense of marginalized voices, and her ability to cut through nonsense with a single, unshakable sentence. Each represented more than themselves. Jones carried the weight of conspiratorial culture, the belief that truth is whatever you shout loudest. Crockett embodied something rarer, the reminder that facts, dignity, and lived experience are stronger than any performance of rage. And so when their worlds finally collided live on air, it was more than just a heated exchange. It was a battle over the very foundation of public discourse in America. Could the nation still distinguish fact from fiction? Could dignity still triumph over demagoguery? Or had the noise become too loud, drowning out truth itself? The tension before their debate wasn't just about two individuals. It was about two competing visions of what America listens to, believes in, and shares. Millions were already watching Crockett emerge as a viral force in hearings, dismantling weak arguments with precision and humor. Millions more were still under the sway of Alex Jones's empire of paranoia. When they sat across from one another, it wasn't just for ratings, it was for the soul of the conversation itself. And when these two finally faced each other live on air, America witnessed something they'd never forget. Long before the cameras captured his volcanic outbursts with Jasmine Crockett, Alex Jones had already carved out his place in American culture, not as a leader, not as a thinker, but as a salesman of fear. He branded himself as the ultimate truth-teller, a renegade who dared to speak what the so-called elites wanted to suppress. Yet behind that mask of defiance was something far less noble, a man who discovered that fear could be monetized, Paranoia could be packaged, and lies could be sold like snake oil. Jones's rise wasn't accidental. In the 1990s, when distrust of government was swelling, he seized the moment. He shouted about black helicopters, secret military plots, and the looming apocalypse. While most Americans laughed off such ideas, a loyal audience clung to him. With each rant, each fiery broadcast, his following grew. To them, he wasn't just a talk show host. He was a prophet of distrust, warning them that every tragedy, every headline was proof of a hidden agenda. But the power of Jones's persona wasn't in accuracy. It was in performance. His voice, a thundering growl, his gestures wild and theatrical, his eyes darting with paranoia. He didn't present facts, he presented conviction. And in a media environment flooded with uncertainty, conviction itself became intoxicating. People believed not because the evidence held up, but because he sounded like he believed it himself. Then came the moment that revealed the depth of his cruelty. Sandy Hook. When grieving parents were at their most vulnerable, Jones called them actors. He told millions that the massacre was staged, that dead children were props in some vast government plot. It was beyond reckless. It was inhumane. Families already broken by tragedy now faced harassment, stalking, and years of torment, all because one man saw an opportunity to turn mourning into ratings. That lie would follow Jones into courtrooms, where juries would hear how his words unleashed real-world terror. He would be ordered to pay hundreds of millions in damages. And still, he called himself a warrior for truth. The hypocrisy never stopped there. As Jones thundered against global elites selling false cures, he himself hawked overpriced supplements, water filters, and miracle pills. He warned listeners that the world was poisoned, and then sold them the antidote, marked up and repackaged. He railed against corruption while building a business model entirely dependent on deception. He told audiences not to trust anyone, except him and his store. What made him dangerous wasn't just his lies, but his reach. Politicians echoed his words. Celebrities parroted his claims. Even a president once called him amazing. Jones wasn't just shouting from the fringes. His voice echoed into the mainstream, bending reality for millions who preferred anger to truth. Yet even as his empire seemed unshakable, cracks were forming. Court after court revealed the rot beneath his bluster. Investigations showed the money, the manipulations, the deliberate distortions. His world, built on shouting, was vulnerable to something simple: evidence. The louder he shouted, the clearer it became that volume was his only defense. Jones had always thrived on confrontation. He needed enemies to stay relevant. He painted himself as a lone warrior, embattled against the machine, when in truth, he was the machine, fueled by deception, thriving on outrage. For years, he managed to keep the illusion alive. But illusions collapse when met with reality strong enough, steady enough, unshakable enough. And that was the role Jasmine Crockett was destined to play. She wasn't intimidated by volume. She wasn't dazzled by theatrics. She had built her life in courtrooms and hearings, places where facts survive and lies do not. Against her, Jones's contradictions, the truth-teller built on lies, the patriot profiting from fear, could no longer hide. But for every empire built on sand, there comes a storm. Before the lights of the television studio ever found her, before her calm stare brought Alex Jones' tirades to a standstill, Jasmine Crockett was already forging her reputation as a fighter, not through chaos, but through clarity. Her story is not one of inherited power or amplified platforms. It is the story of a woman who understood that dignity, sharpened by discipline, could become its own weapon. Crockett's roots trace back to a life grounded in hard work and perseverance. The daughter of a working-class family, she carried with her the lessons of sacrifice and grit. She wasn't born into a megaphone. She earned her voice in the spaces where voices are too often silenced. In the courtroom, standing beside those written off, dismissed, or forgotten. As a defense attorney, she faced down systems designed to intimidate and overwhelm. And time after time, she found her edge not in volume, but in precision. What set her apart was her refusal to flinch. Judges could glare, opponents could sneer, but Crockett never let them see her rattled. She learned that silence, used strategically, could pierce louder than any shouted word. She learned that when you wield truth like a blade, you don't need to swing wildly. You strike carefully, and the cut is deeper. That poise carried her into activism. In rallies, in community meetings, in late-night strategy sessions with those who believed change was still possible, Crockett became a voice people leaned on. She wasn't afraid to be unapologetic about who she was, a black woman, a lawyer, a believer that justice wasn't just a word for textbooks, but a standard America owed its people. Every slight, every dismissal, every raised eyebrow she encountered only refined her steel. When she entered politics, that same steel became her signature. On Capitol Hill, where cynicism often chokes the air, she brought a fresh defiance. In hearings, her sharp wit cut through evasions like a hot blade through wax. Clips of her exchanges went viral, not because she screamed, but because she said exactly what needed saying with precision and fire. People who had been dismissed, talked over, or gaslit in their own lives suddenly saw themselves in her, someone who refused to be drowned out, someone who carried their dignity into every room. And that dignity was not performative. Crockett's calm was not the calm of indifference. It was the calm of someone who had fought for every inch of space she occupied and refused to yield it. When opponents grew red-faced, when insults dripped with condescension, she didn't match rage with rage. She met it with a steady gaze, a perfectly timed retort, a reminder that fury without substance collapses under its own weight. That's why she became more than just a politician. To many, Crockett embodied resilience itself. She was the answer to years of frustration, proof that someone could confront arrogance without becoming arrogant, that someone could embody strength without abandoning grace. For immigrant families, for marginalized communities, for anyone who had ever been told to know their place, Crockett's rise was personal validation. She wasn't just representing them in Congress. She was living proof that the quiet power of truth could face down the loud machinery of lies. And so, when the day came that she sat across from Alex Jones, the symbolism was almost too perfect. On one side, the man who built his empire by shouting down opponents, thriving on chaos. On the other, a woman who had built her life on holding her ground, turning condescension into opportunity, showing that composure could be louder than any microphone. This wasn't just another debate. It was the embodiment of two opposing philosophies colliding in the same room. For Jones, domination came from drowning out, overwhelming, intimidating. For Crockett, victory came from standing still, letting the storm rage, and then slicing through the noise with a single undeniable truth. Her entire life had prepared her for this moment. The courtrooms, the hearings, the viral exchanges, the years of being underestimated. Every battle she fought for dignity and justice now converged into this clash. And for millions watching, she wasn't just another politician confronting a conspiracy theorist. She was every viewer who had ever been interrupted, every voice that had ever been shouted down, every person who had ever been told to sit quietly while lies dominated the room. And when these two worlds collided live, Crockett didn't just survive the storm, she redirected it. The studio hums with that nervous energy only live broadcasts can create. Cameras roll, lights burn hot, and on the other side of the desk, Alex Jones is already in full eruption. His voice thunders across the microphones like a storm breaking glass, his hands slamming the desk in rhythm with every new accusation. Government plots, secret agendas, traitors hiding in plain sight. The litany spills out in a torrent of half-sentences and paranoia. He points, he growls, he bellows so loudly that the mic peaks, the sound distorting into static fury. Crockett doesn't flinch. She sits still, her posture straight, her eyes unblinking. The contrast is so sharp it feels theatrical. One figure combusting before millions of viewers, the other as still as stone, watching, waiting. Jones barrels forward, weaving conspiracies so tangled that even his producers look uneasy. His face is scarlet now, his shirt damp with sweat, his voice rising until it teeters on the edge of a scream. The audience can feel it. This is a man trying to drown his opponent before she can speak. He's seen what Crockett can do with a single sentence, and he's terrified of silence giving her room to find her opening. So he rages louder, faster, stomping verbal circles around himself, a man possessed by the fear of losing control. And meanwhile, Crockett lets him burn. She doesn't raise her hand yet. She doesn't interject. She lets the storm exhaust itself. Viewers at home are glued to their screens, their hearts pounding with anticipation. They've seen Jones rage before, but never against someone who refuses to play his game. The longer Crockett waits, the more his frenzy begins to feel desperate. He stammers, his words slurring into half-formed accusations. His once commanding voice begins to sound like a man arguing with shadows. And still, she waits. That waiting is its own power. It builds tension like a drumbeat, daring him to keep swinging until he punches himself out. The audience knows it's coming, that moment when Crockett will finally speak, but the suspense is unbearable. Every second she holds back only sharpens the edge of whatever she's about to unleash. The studio air grows heavy, the clash of tones almost unbearable, his roar against her silence. Viewers lean closer to their screens, whispering to themselves, willing her to strike. They know she has the facts, the composure, the blade that can cut through his fortress of noise. All she needs is the perfect moment. And then, with one line, Crockett turned the entire show upside down. The storm of Alex Jones' tirade finally collapses under its own weight, his voice hoarse from the roar, his shirt sticking with sweat. The studio is charged, air thick, like the silence after thunder. Viewers feel it. The cameras catch Crockett at that precise moment, still poised, still calm, her eyes steady as if she's been waiting for this very second. She leans forward just slightly, her voice measured, clear, deliberate. The first sentence cuts like a bell ringing through fog. Mr. Jones, for a man who claims to defend the truth, you sure spend a lot of time in courtrooms proving otherwise. The words land heavy. The silence after them is louder than his previous outbursts. Jones blinks, mouth open, unsure whether to laugh, shout, or sneer. Before he can decide, Crockett continues, her cadence precise, almost surgical. The families of Sandy Hook, they didn't imagine their grief. They buried children. And while they mourned, you told America it was theater. You called them actors. And now you owe them over $1 billion for the lies you spread. Gasps ripple through the audience, not because these facts are new, but because of the way she wields them. Calm, cold, absolute. The camera pans back to Jones, who starts to bark in protest. That's out of context, he stammers, his words collapsing into coughs. But Crockett doesn't raise her voice. She simply continues, letting his interruptions clang uselessly against her composure. You built an empire, she says evenly, not on courage, not on truth, but on selling fear, on peddling supplements and snake oil, on inventing enemies that don't exist so you could profit off the paranoia you created. You call yourself a patriot, but what patriot sues to avoid accountability for lies that hurt real Americans? Jones's face turns from red to blotchy crimson. His hand smacks the desk again, but the sound is no longer commanding, it's desperate. He mutters about free speech, about conspiracies against him, about being silenced, but every word feels hollow, broken under the weight of her calm recital of facts. And then Crockett delivers the blade. She reads his own words back to him, quotes pulled directly from transcripts, court documents, past broadcasts. Each phrase is a mirror, forcing him to hear himself stripped of theatrics, laid bare for what it always was, cruelty, packaged as entertainment. You said the whole thing was fake. You said nobody died. Those were your words, not mine. Tell America now, do you still stand by them?
Jones opens his mouth, but no words come. His jaw works soundlessly, his face damp with sweat, his eyes darting for escape. For a man who thrived on sound, silence becomes his undoing. Crockett doesn't gloat, she doesn't sneer. She simply waits, letting the dead air fill the space, letting his failure to answer echo louder than anything she could say. The moment is devastating, theatrical in its restraint. Viewers at home feel chills. They know they're watching history, a rare instance where accountability isn't shouted down but demanded with precision and dignity. And outside that studio, the world is already reacting. Twitter timelines ignite in real time. Clips of Crockett taking down Jones spread like wildfire, captions shouting, "She ended him live!" Hashtags trend instantly. Hashtag Crockett versus Jones. Hashtag truth over lies. Hashtag mic drop moment. Memes are born within minutes. Screenshots of Jones sweating contrasted with Crockett's calm gaze. Celebrities, journalists, and ordinary citizens flood the digital space with praise. One user tweets, "This is what it looks like when dignity destroys deception." Another, "Finally, someone stood up to the bully and won." Back in the studio, Jones tries to claw his way back. He interrupts, his voice cracking, words tumbling over each other. "This is a hit job. You're twisting. I've already apologized." But the fury no longer has weight. His volume has become the noise of a man unraveling, while Crockett's measured voice carries the authority of truth. She delivers her final blow with devastating simplicity. "Free speech," she says softly, "doesn't mean freedom from consequences. It doesn't mean the right to lie about grieving parents or profit off their pain. And if you think it does, then maybe it's time you learn the difference between courage and cruelty." The room falls silent. For the first time, Alex Jones looks small. The man who built a career shouting others into submission has been reduced to sputters and sweat, undone not by rage, but by calm facts wielded with precision. Viewers know instantly this wasn't just a debate, it was a dismantling. It was the moment a conspiracy kingpin met his match in someone who refused to play by his rules. And yet, as powerful as this confrontation was, its impact didn't stay confined to that studio or to the millions glued to their screens. The reverberation stretched far beyond. The broadcast had barely ended before the internet detonated. Within minutes, clips of Jasmine Crockett calmly dismantling Alex Jones were flooding every corner of social media. Twitter became a frenzy of disbelief, delight, and vindication. Hashtag shot to the top of the trends. Hashtag Crockett versus Jones. Hashtag truth over lies. Hashtag mic drop moment. Memes were born within minutes, screenshots of Jones sweating contrasted with Crockett's calm gaze. Celebrities, journalists, and ordinary citizens flood the digital space with praise. One user tweets, "This is what it looks like when dignity destroys deception." Another, "Finally, someone stood up to the bully and won." Back in the studio, Jones tries to claw his way back. He interrupts, his voice cracking, words tumbling over each other. "This is a hit job. You're twisting. I've already apologized." But the fury no longer has weight. His volume has become the noise of a man unraveling, while Crockett's measured voice carries the authority of truth. She delivers her final blow with devastating simplicity. "Free speech," she says softly, "doesn't mean freedom from consequences. It doesn't mean the right to lie about grieving parents or profit off their pain. And if you think it does, then maybe it's time you learn the difference between courage and cruelty." The room falls silent. For the first time, Alex Jones looks small. The man who built a career shouting others into submission has been reduced to sputters and sweat, undone not by rage, but by calm facts wielded with precision. Viewers know instantly this wasn't just a debate, it was a dismantling. It was the moment a conspiracy kingpin met his match in someone who refused to play by his rules. And yet, as powerful as this confrontation was, its impact didn't stay confined to that studio or to the millions glued to their screens. The reverberation stretched far beyond. The broadcast had barely ended before the internet detonated. Within minutes, clips of Jasmine Crockett calmly dismantling Alex Jones were flooding every corner of social media. Twitter became a frenzy of disbelief, delight, and vindication. Hashtag shot to the top of the trends. Hashtag Crockett versus Jones. Hashtag truth over lies. Hashtag mic drop moment. Memes were born within minutes, screenshots of Jones sweating contrasted with Crockett's calm gaze. Celebrities, journalists, and ordinary citizens flood the digital space with praise. One user tweets, "This is what it looks like when dignity destroys deception." Another, "Finally, someone stood up to the bully and won." Back in the studio, Jones tries to claw his way back. He interrupts, his voice cracking, words tumbling over each other. "This is a hit job. You're twisting. I've already apologized." But the fury no longer has weight. His volume has become the noise of a man unraveling, while Crockett's measured voice carries the authority of truth. She delivers her final blow with devastating simplicity. "Free speech," she says softly, "doesn't mean freedom from consequences. It doesn't mean the right to lie about grieving parents or profit off their pain. And if you think it does, then maybe it's time you learn the difference between courage and cruelty." The room falls silent. For the first time, Alex Jones looks small. The man who built a career shouting others into submission has been reduced to sputters and sweat, undone not by rage, but by calm facts wielded with precision. Viewers know instantly this wasn't just a debate, it was a dismantling. It was the moment a conspiracy kingpin met his match in someone who refused to play by his rules. And yet, as powerful as this confrontation was, its impact didn't stay confined to that studio, or to the millions glued to their screens.
When the roar of commentary began to quiet, when the memes had made their rounds and a hashtag started to settle, a deeper truth came into focus. What Jasmine Crockett had delivered that night wasn't simply a takedown of Alex Jones. It was a lesson in the power of dignity. She had shown, in front of millions, that truth does not need to scream to be heard. It only needs the courage to stand firm. For years, Jones had embodied the idea that chaos equals control. The louder you yell, the more people believe you. The angrier your words, the more authentic they must seem. But Crockett shattered that illusion. She revealed that noise without substance is nothing more than desperation. Lies, no matter how loudly they are shouted, eventually collapse under their own weight. And when they do, they leave only silence. Crockett's composure was not just personal style. It was a strategy rooted in something universal. People from all walks of life have faced versions of their own Alex Jones. The bully in the classroom, the boss who belittles, the politician who dismisses, the stranger who shouts them down. And for anyone who has ever been told to stay quiet or know your place, Crockett's performance was vindication. She did not back down. She did not raise her voice to match the chaos. She let truth speak for itself, and in doing so, she reminded millions that resilience is its own form of power. That's why the moment mattered so much more than a viral clip. It wasn't about Crockett proving Alex Jones wrong. It was about reminding people that dignity is not weakness. It is in fact one of the strongest weapons we have. Lies will eventually fold, but dignity endures. The inspiration spread far beyond politics. Parents showed their children Crockett's calm as an example of how to stand tall under pressure. Teachers used her composure as a lesson in debate classes, proof that facts will always outlast fury. Communities who have been marginalized saw a mirror of themselves in her strength, the ability to withstand noise and transform it into an opportunity to shine. In that studio, Crockett wasn't just defending herself. She was defending the idea that truth still matters, that it can cut through the fog of deception, that it can still move a nation when wielded with patience and courage. And for every viewer who had grown weary of shouting matches, of misinformation, of endless noise, her performance was a breath of fresh air, proof that integrity can still win. Because in the end, this wasn't just her victory, it was a reminder of what we all deserve. In the end, the image that lingers is the one that started it all. Alex Jones, red-faced and pounding his desk, unraveling in real time, while Jasmine Crockett sat across from him, calm, steady, and armed only with truth. It was the moment the bluster of deception collided with the dignity of composure, and for once, chaos lost. Crockett didn't just expose his lies. She exposed the weakness behind them. She showed that when you strip away the shouting, the paranoia, the performance, what remains is emptiness. And in that emptiness, truth stood tall. That's why this confrontation mattered. It wasn't about one host or one congresswoman. It was about what we choose to value as a nation. Do we reward rage or do we reward resilience? Do we let deception dominate our conversations or do we insist on facts, compassion, and dignity leading the way? Crockett reminded us that we still have a choice, and that the louder noise gets, the more powerful calm courage becomes. And here's where you come in. If you felt that spark of validation watching Crockett stand tall, if you believe truth still has a place in our politics and in our lives, then be part of this movement. Share this story. Subscribe to make sure you never miss the next moment when dignity triumphs over chaos. Add your voice to the growing chorus that refuses to be drowned out. Because this isn't just about Jasmine Crockett or Alex Jones. It's about us, about every person who believes that facts are stronger than fear, and that we deserve a public square where truth is louder than lies. The fight for that future isn't over, but together, we can make sure it's one worth watching.